The fire that shook Flora, a town's unanswered tragedy. Galen Rose stood outside her home in the freezing night air, her breath coming in desperate gasps. She was barefoot, clad only in a thin nightgown, but she didn't feel the cold. The only thing she felt was sheer panic. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the flames, her voice hoarse from screaming. "Keyana! Keyara! Kerrielle! Kionnie!" she cried, her voice breaking with every name. From inside the burning home, 4 little voices shrieked for their mother. The fire roared back at them, greedy and merciless, swallowing their cries one by one. A neighbor, Jeff Cook, bolted from his home at the sound of her screams. The heat hit him like a wall as he sprinted toward the house, his heart hammering in his chest. The fire had already consumed most of the structure. Smoke billowed into the night sky, turning the air thick and unbreathable. Through the haze, he saw Galen. Her arms were wrapped around herself, her body rocking back and forth. When she turned to him, her face was streaked with tears, her eyes hollow. I failed, she whispered. Jeff grabbed her shoulders. "What do you mean?" "I couldn't get my babies." She sobbed into her hands, her body racked with grief. Jeff turned to the house, his gut twisting. Others had gathered now, neighbors, passers-by, but no one could get close enough to help. The fire had spread too fast, too violently. It was hopeless. And then, silence. The screams were gone. By the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. From a distance, neighbors watched in stunned horror as the bodies of 4 little girls were carried out on stretchers, their lifeless forms covered in white sheets. Keyana Davis, 11. Keyara Phillips, 9. Kerrielle McDonald, 7. Kionnie Welch, 5. Flora, a town of just 2,000, had never seen a tragedy like this. And more than 7 months later, the grief still clung to the town like a shadow. The remains of the house stood as a grim reminder of that night. Soot-blackened walls, shattered windows, and the unmistakable stench of charred wood still lingered in the air. Yet on the porch, untouched by the fire, lay scattered toys, a pink doll, a tiny jump rope, a stuffed bear. Flora wasn't just grieving. Flora was afraid. At first, officials said the fire had started in the kitchen, possibly near the refrigerator. But 2 months later, the news shattered what little peace the town had left. The fire was arson. Someone had set the fire. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some whispered that it was someone in the family. Others speculated about an outsider, someone unknown. But there were no answers. No arrests. Just a growing sense of unease. Chastity Fox, a neighbor, shook her head whenever she heard people gossiping. "I saw Galen that night," she said. "I saw her screaming for her babies. She would have died for them if she could." But even Fox admitted people in Flora had changed. Doors that once stayed unlocked were now bolted shut. Strangers were eyed with suspicion. Tracy Rose, the girl's grandfather, sat on his porch, staring at a cross planted in his yard. Taped to it were photos of his granddaughters, their smiling faces now frozen in time. "They was my heart," he said, his voice cracking. "My girls." He had been in Tennessee the night of the fire. He still remembered his last conversation with them, just a day before. They had helped him pack for his trip, their little hands folding shirts and tucking them into his suitcase. "Papa, don't go," Kionnie had pleaded. He hadn't understood why they were so insistent. Now, the memory haunted him. Authorities stood by their conclusion. This was no accident. Someone had set that fire. But 8 years later, no one had been caught. The case was slipping into the realm of cold cases, another unsolved mystery. "They were 4 innocent little girls," said Eve Gibson, another Flora resident. "And they deserve justice." On the edge of town, a simple bench stands in a quiet park, engraved with 6 names: the 4 girls from the fire and 2 others, Liberty German and Abigail Williams, murdered in Delphi just months later. Flowers are always placed on that bench. The town of Flora will never forget. The fire may have destroyed a home, but it also left scars on an entire community, scars that will never fully heal until justice is served. And until then, the question will always linger: who set the fire that stole 4 little lives? And why? Crime never sleeps, and neither do we. Subscribe for more shocking cases.